This here is another viewer's broken gaming PC. It apparently no longer sends a signal to a monitor. Now with this symptom, over the years I've learned to just expect the unexpected. We could be looking at a graphics card issue, HDMI port issue, or display cable issue. Maybe the display itself is going bad, in which case I won't be able to account for that here, obviously. Maybe there's a problem with the platform. Maybe there's a power supply issue. You really just never know until you dive in. The owner said his wife was watching a video when all of a sudden the screen went black out of nowhere, unprovoked, and the keyboard also power cycled. From then on out, they were unable to get a signal out, no matter how many times they reset the rig. They also noted some weird USB power delivery issues from then on. So I'm not really sure, again, what we're looking at, but I think we can get to the bottom of it. I hope you will stay with me. Meet the Wolfbox MF200, a high-performance electric duster capable of peak wind speeds of nearly 90 meters per second, and that means it absolutely rips. Yeah. And it works great for cleaning up dusty, grimy PC builds. Just make sure not to overspool or overbear fan blades in the process. It also works great for caked up radiators, ensuring airflow and temps are in check. You can even use it to air dry a car you've just washed and detailed. Yes, it's that strong, rivaling that of a proper leaf blower, but with the portability of a large cell phone, thanks to removable and rechargeable batteries. The Wolfbox MegaFlow 200 Air Duster is perfect for any DIY enthusiast, and you can learn more about it by clicking the sponsor link below. Hello there, and welcome to Fix or Flop, a playlist where we attempt to fix broken gaming PCs like this one for free, meaning we don't charge for labor or replacement hardware if necessary, and that's thanks to your viewership. So thank you so much for clicking on this video. This allows us to continue doing what we do here in the Central Florida area, giving back in a small way to this community. It's just been a real privilege. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity. This rig I'm pretty optimistic about for two reasons. One, it's a pretty basic system, air-cooled, it's all relatively accessible. And two, it's a pretty cheap rig, and there's nothing wrong with that. This was purchased a few years ago, pre-built from CyberPower through Best Buy, and it's sporting a Ryzen 3 2300X and an RX 570. There's a single 8 gig stick of DDR4 in here, not too surprising given this budget, and if my memory serves correct, a pretty sketchy power supply. In fact, let's you and me together figure out what this is. Again, the owners didn't know too much about it because they bought it pre-built. They're not super tech savvy, and that's totally fine. Normally I like to save this for later, but we're in too deep now. I want to figure out what unit this is. Wow, you know what? I'm actually a bit impressed. This is an APV 600 watt Prestige, and it's 80 plus gold certified. Now, it's not non-modular or anything, so pretty bare bones in that respect, but I honestly thought this would be a worse unit than it is. It's not a super high-end one, of course, but for this budget, I'll take it. It could still be our problem, though. I think it's time we try powering it on. Here we go. I am not expecting a post, but I am expecting it to at least fire up. That's the power button, right? Oh, no, sorry, wrong button. There we go. And we are plugged directly into the 570, which is important here. You have a discrete card, make sure you connect to the card and not through the motherboard. In this case here with a 2300X, we don't even have integrated graphics, so it's not like we'd be able to get anything through that anyway. And I'm assuming that the owner knows that. It sounds like they understood the basics. They just kind of ran into a few roadblocks when trying to troubleshoot on their own. Of course, most folks don't have extra parts laying around to troubleshoot with anyway, which can complicate things. But yeah, you can see we are not getting a picture on screen. That tracks, at least, with what we were told. Now, I don't always do things this way, but since the owner was in the predicament that I find a lot of folks in, where they just run out of hardware to swap in while testing, while troubleshooting on their own, because honestly, as much as I would like folks to continue submitting rigs to be fixed here, right, that gives me the ability to create content, right, to essentially make a living, I want to give folks as many tools as possible to keep this from happening, because having to drive, having to wait several days potentially, like it's just it can be a hassle, right? I understand that. So what I'm going to do here is try to troubleshoot as much as I can without introducing any new hardware. It's kind of an interesting challenge, an interesting twist to this particular episode. I want to see if we can potentially isolate the problem, maybe not fix the issue, but isolate the issue without swapping in anything new. And perhaps the easiest thing anyone can do without special hardware is clear their CMOS. Now this board has two special pins at the bottom. We're going to jump labeled clear CMOS or CMOS. Sometimes it's labeled clear RTC for real-time clock. Essentially what this is going to do is allow us to cut power to our BIOS chip, which is full of volatile memory. So when we cut power there, it's going to clear all those settings and potentially clear up our issue. We'll just take a screwdriver, something conductive. We're going to hold it against these two lower pins for about 20 or so seconds. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to be be connected to power to perform this process. This only involves the onboard battery, which for this particular board I think is somewhere underneath the graphics card. That's the only source of power that we are cutting. Just keep a power source handy, right? Because you want to be able to try powering this up again once you have cleared it. Here we go. So it still fires up. We haven't made things worse. But in all reality, this probably won't fix this particular issue. It's just so simple to do. I mean, why not? Just check it off the list and move on to more important things. Don't be discouraged if this doesn't want to play ball yet. Another thing we can check that doesn't involve extra hardware is our DRAM. Now, during transport especially, I have seen some of these DIMMs pop loose, maybe bend or break sockets. You have to be very, very tough on these. Usually they're pretty rigid, pretty stiff, but I always like to give these a check top and bottom. Make sure you don't hear any clicks. Make sure you don't see any golden fingers along the sides. In this case here, since it does feel like it is snug, I'm just gonna move it to another slot. We only have 2 on this board. It's a pretty cheap one. So I'm just going to pop the retention arms down on this outermost, and then we'll clip this in. There's 1, there's 2, and we'll try it once more. If this does work, of course, it's not gonna tell us that our DRAM is to blame, because if it posts, then that means our DRAM is being detected just in a different slot. It could mean we have an issue with either a CPU or a motherboard, but it'll at least point us in the right direction here. That's one other very quick thing most anybody can do, right? Every system has to have some level of DRAM in order to post, and that's what we're going to try here. We're gonna see if maybe the innermost slot or the CPU doesn't want to play ball with that first channel. Do we have picture? Doesn't look like it. Alrighty. I think it's about time we move on to the visual inspection phase. We can start with our major connections, including our 24 pin, which is fully seated. And we don't have to check the power supply side again because this is a non-modular unit. 8-pin EPS and supplemental PCIe 8-pin are also fully seated, as are all other primary connections down below, including HD audio. We've got USB 2, it looks like there. Our power switch pins are the ones connected to our power switch cable. That's super important. And our USB 3 to the right of that. We have 2 SATA data cables. I've never seen any of this stuff actually like prevent a system from posting, but one thing we can do is disconnect all of this stuff because none of it's vital, right? You don't need any of this connected to get the system to actually post. So if you do suspect any of this is to blame, go ahead and just remove it from the equation and jump the power pins manually. By the way, some might insist that this step actually come first, especially in situations where the owner may report that they smelled like an electric burning smell or they saw sparks or smoke. In that case especially, yeah, maybe check all of your connections, isolate your power supply before doing anything, before even attempting your first power on. But in most cases where you just don't have a signal out or the system refuses to power on at all, clearing the CMOS, checking DDR4, DDR5, like system RAM seating, those are just so simple. I'd rather get them out of the way up front because neither of those manipulations is going to affect anything in the long run, right? So no harm, no foul. It also doesn't hurt at this point to inspect each and every port at the back of your case. So that's everything that connects from your motherboard as well as your graphics card and any additional PCI devices. So pull your phone out, go ahead and turn your flash on and give each one of these a very close inspection. Make sure you don't see any bent or missing pins, anything crossed over. Those shorts could definitely keep your system from playing nicely. Now we should also check behind the motherboard tray, make sure nothing is shorted or disconnected back here. These are a bunch of daisy chain fans, I believe, all Molex powered. It's not the greatest for loudness or anything, but it gets the job done in a bare bones rig. I don't see anything obvious back here either. There are a few RGB cables. We can bypass all of this stuff in the next step, but I just wanted you to know that there is more involved that you can't see, usually in the basement area or behind the motherboard. And since I know this case quite well from Fantex, we've built in it several times before, I know that the 3.5-inch hard drive bays are actually front accessible. I'm gonna check these as well. So SATA powers look good, as do SATA datas. They're a bit kinked, but nothing too alarming there. All right, next step, we're gonna bypass literally all of this. I'm also going to disconnect all of the RGB and all of the case fans. The only things that'll be connected at the end of this are the graphics card, of course the platform, so CPU, motherboard, DRAM, and maybe the CPU cooler fan, just to be on the safe side. That should not be preventing the system from posting. We are getting closer and closer to the point where we're going to have to introduce hardware, right? At some point, we're going to isolate so far down that there's nothing else we can really test without introducing something new. I just wanna let you know, we're approaching that moment shortly. I'm going to jump the power pins here and see if what we have isolated fixes this. I don't really think it will. If we do get a post though, it'll suggest that maybe a controller or something associated with maybe SATA power or Molex power is giving us an issue. But yeah, doesn't look like that's the case here. Still a black screen. And just to prove to you that our monitor is connected to power, I'm gonna pull the power cable out and then reconnect it. You'll see we'll get a no signal notification. Oh boy. One of our major components is definitely dead. So I think at this point, we could go one of two ways. The CPU and the motherboard are always the most difficult to isolate and test, right? So we're either going to need to test the power supply next or the graphics card. Normally, I would say just pull out the graphics card and run through the IGP. If you get picture through that, then that could suggest that either your card isn't receiving appropriate power or your card is defective. In this case, since we don't have that ability, we're going to have to introduce a different card. So I think it's about time we introduce our first new component, or one that we know at least is working outside of the system, this being our trusty GT1030. Now again, in a lot of cases, your CPU will have integrated graphics, so you won't need something like this handy, but if you know that your CPU doesn't support IGPs, let's say it'd be like a 2nd or 3rd gen Ryzen CPU, almost all of those except for the G SKUs don't have IGPs, which is something I'm glad that AMD rectified with later revisions. I recommend something like this handy. You could buy like a GT710 or a 1030 like this for, used like 20 bucks. And if you ever run into issues where you don't have signal out, this could come in super handy. So let's pop this bad boy out. I noticed the PCIe little clip here at the end is missing. That's not a huge deal. It comes out pretty easy. I'm gonna slide in this tiny guy. We don't have to worry about supplemental power with it, which I love for troubleshooting. We'll make sure we reconnect our HDMI cable to the back of this. If this works, then I see things only going one of two ways. Either his 570 is dead and needs to be replaced. Anything I do here in the office is not going to be a permanent fix for it, even if we blast the GPU itself with a heat gun. Or we have a power supply issue where, again, probably the supplemental 8-pin is not receiving adequate juice despite what the LED is telling us. It might just be a sense LED where it's just detecting that the cable is there, not necessarily that power is being delivered. So I want to clear that up as well. These more basic cards probably don't do the former. Alrighty, power's back on. We're going to jump the power pins once more. And there we go. CPU fan is spinning. Again, I've left everything else disconnected from an earlier step just to keep the number of variables at bay. Let's see what happens through our GT1030.
A few moments later.
You know what? I'm kind of surprised by that. I expected with a no signal symptom that we'd probably have an issue with the graphics card. This is a fairly old card. A lot of these were mined with. I don't suspect this one was because it was bought in a pre-built rig, but there's no telling really where CyberPower got this. I would expect it to be new, but with a lot of these, you just never know. This came from the mining era. This indicates that something is likely wrong with our platform. I'm hoping it's not RAM related, although an 8 gig stick is not the end of the world. I definitely have one of those to swap in, but oh, that would be a real shame, and it would be the worst timing possible. Here's a working 8 gig stick from my own stash. This is Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4. Again, we've used this DIMM many times before. If we swap this in and we get a picture out, yeah, that ain't good news. So in it goes, this time back into slot A1. I think this is slot A1, the innermost. And that was fast. That's a post. First time we've seen a picture out from this machine. And it occurs after we swap out the owner's DIMM. Not a great sign. Now, a few things I want to check before writing this off. I definitely want to try my DIMM in the outermost slot, and then I want to try this again back in the innermost slot, just to make sure that there isn't a hang up with the board and posting with a DIMM in the wrong config. Yeah, not off to a good start. This DIMM doesn't want to post in either slot. You can see, black screen. Oh no. And just to bring this point further home, I've tried my known working DIMM in the outermost DIMM slot. We get a post right away without issue. So the moment the owner's DIMM touches this system, it straight up refuses to post. In fact, I can hear right away with my DIMM in there, the fan curve kick in. So the CPU fan ramps up and then ramps back down. It doesn't do that at all with this one. So I don't think it's making it very far into the post process. Probably somewhere around the CPU DRAM check. Of course, it's hitting a wall. I unfortunately don't have a like-for-like DIMM to hold up next to this one for visual inspection. We're gonna do our best to scrutinize the PCB, or what of it we can see, with my macro lens, which is, it's not the one that's on the camera right now. Whoa. Why are we looking at my face? We should be looking at the DIMM. Ah, this is better. Right, so we get a nice personal up-close look at this board. I want to check for any broken SMDs, any exposed pads where we shouldn't see them. We can reference some online photos if we're concerned about any particular spot. I will say though, so far, things look good. And again, based on the owner's story, this doesn't sound like it would have been an install issue. So I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see anything wrong with this. Typically, when these are installed incorrectly, you'll notice some of these lobbed off just because they maybe don't align with the slot correctly when they apply force. But since this system was more or less just chilling, right? The video was being watched, it would surprise me to see one of these or more missing. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing obvious here. No signs of physical damage. From what we can see, we probably have an issue with one of the memory chips under this heat slab. For now, though, I think the quickest, most effective thing we can do is swap it outright. And you know what? I've just made up my mind. We are going to replace this defective DIMM with our known working LPX DDR4 DIMM permanently. The one we've used for so many years to check on DDR4 platforms is going to a good home. It's unfortunate this even needs to be said because some folks have such a negative view of things. They always think that I'm being fleeced, that somebody is screwing me over with a defective plant of some kind. Oh, they just want free hardware, Greg. Explain to me why they would only plant a single 8 gig DDR4 DIMM in a system like this. Why would they do that and not use a 32 gig kit or a 64 gig kit in hopes that I replace that full capacity? Not that I would in this market. This will keep the playing field even. They won't even know at the end of the day that anything was changed because we're swapping in a basically identical DDR4 DIMM. Ideally, I'd like to throw in a second. Unfortunately, I only have one of these. I'm not sure where the other one went, but I've only ever had one to test with over the years. And because it's been so sturdy, so rock solid, and so dependable, I want to give this one in particular, to these owners so that they don't have issues, hopefully, for the foreseeable future. So what we're gonna do is swap this DIMM back into the innermost slot. I think that's A1, and then we're gonna start slowly reconnecting things one by one until the system is fully reassembled, hopefully still posting. We'll verify that it loads into Windows once more. There is sensitive stuff on this boot drive, and call it a day. Wait a minute. Did you catch that? This is actually a 16 gig DIMM. I had no idea. This entire time, but for like what, 3, 4, 5 years now, I've assumed this was an 8 gig stick. That is crazy. My attention to detail is nowhere to be found. And this is still going in the system, by the way. I've already said it, I'm owning it. This is gonna be a nice upgrade now. So we're doubling system RAM. No, it's not gonna support dual channel. This is still only a single stick. But another really cool positive to take away from this one. I took some time with the RX 570 out of the chassis to visually inspect what I could see around the PCB. Of course, the shroud is still installed, and I don't want to really tinker with this card too much. I didn't hear anything about an overheating issue or anything along those lines, so I don't want to risk further damage by attempting to repaste this or repad it around the memory chips. It just, in my eyes, isn't worth it at this point, given what the owners have already gone through. If they notice temperature spikes down the line, they can always reach back out. But I will say the card otherwise looks pretty good. It is a tad dirty, but otherwise visually healthy. It was reinstalled and independently tested before everything else was reconnected, and it did post, which is a relief at this point. And now with everything else reconnected, including our boot drive and additional storage drive, those two up front were the reasons why this rig was not loading into Windows before, it is now time for our final attempted power on. We can use the power button again, and there we go. All of our fans are spinning. The chassis fans are illuminated. Graphics card fans are still spinning. This should be a post, and there it is. All right. This could have been worse. We could have had multiple components fail here. It's pretty odd that a random DIMM just goes bad while being used, but honestly, it was a pretty easy fix. We didn't have to touch the CPU, we didn't have to touch the motherboard, and as you can see here, it boots up into Windows effortlessly. It is just a shame though at the timing of this. If these owners hadn't been local to the Central Florida area, they could have been potentially out $50, $100 or more on top of a diagnostic fee potentially to get this single DIMM swapped. And I know there are some conspiracy theorists out there who might propose that this is planned obsolescence, that there's some kind of detonator in here that went off at the perfect time because, oh, they want you to spend a lot more money now, these evil, greedy memory companies. But again, I still stand by the fact that this could have been way worse. This could have been a 16 gig DIMM, which doesn't really matter in this particular case, but you know, for someone else outside of Central Florida, it would have been more expensive to replace. This also could have been a DDR5 DIMM, which would have been a pretty penny. That one definitely would have hurt. The fact this is only a single 8 gig DIMM and it's lasted for what, 5 or 6 years? I'll just chalk that up to a bit of bad luck. Thank you so much again for your support in this one. I just want to round this out by reading you the response that I received from the owner when I told him that I got it back up and running and what we found was the issue. He said, "Thank you so much. We appreciate it a lot. My wife is excited to be able to play Minecraft again." And as a huge Minecraft fan myself, we, by the way, have a free server open to anyone. You can join via our public Discord linked below. Gotta say, that's one cool way to take advantage of this machine. This certainly could have ended way worse. You saw that we were able to troubleshoot a fair amount without introducing any new hardware at all, so maybe that's something new, fresh that you can take away from this particular episode. We also were able to bypass testing things like the power supply, CPU, and motherboard by doing things this way, though that doesn't always turn out to be the case. Sometimes you think you're gonna hit the roadblock earlier and you don't, and by that point you've tested literally everything. That's just the nature of troubleshooting. It's what I love about it. It's like solving a puzzle. I'm gonna get out of here. Again, thank you so much for watching, and thanks for learning with me. And now for a moment of silence.